Let's talk about the Police. And I mean the band The Police, not the cop. I've always loved the Police. The power trio featuring a very young Sting when he was a punk rocker before he became the darling of adult contemporary. Andy Summers came up with so many iconic guitar parts, and Stuart Copeland was really the rock of the band, melding his signature reggae-inspired feel with a fast punk groove. The Police were not together very long. They only released 5 studio albums, which does admittedly make this list a little easier to focus on. So let's not waste any time. I gotta get back to editing History of Rock 2000s. Same guidelines as before. This list is personalized. We're gonna format it like it's a vinyl record, 26 minutes aside, 6 bonus tracks at the end. So let's send a message in a bottle to Roxanne that every little thing she does is magic while having tea in the Sahara. I don't know. We're going to start with the lead-off track from their first album, Outlandos de Amor, and it's called Next to You. It's clearly a product of the late 70s punk movement. In fact, Andy and Stuart felt the love-themed lyrics weren't aggressive enough, but Sting stuck to his guns about keeping the words as they were. Further departing from the punk genre, Andy plays a pretty cool slide solo. It's clear right from the bat that there's something unique about this band, but in my opinion, they're right in line with the UK and CBGB's punk bands of the time, with just enough pop elements to make them accessible. This is further explored on the song So Lonely. Heavily inspired by Bob Marley, it's pretty much the same chords as No Woman, No Cry.
I remember when we used to sit, but I just can't convince myself.
And you can tell they're laying some framework for the emerging new wave genre. I've sang this song quite a few times at my own gigs, and I can tell you Sting sings really high. Not to mention those layers of harmonies which have a very distinct sound. Likewise, Stuart Copeland's drum feel, alternating between halftime and that punk feel with plenty of signature fills in between. I'm glad there wasn't a producer or company executive there to tell him he's overplaying, because his virtuoso drumming is what gives these records so much energy. And what would a Police compilation be without Roxanne? The story goes that Sting was inspired while staying in the red light district of Paris. Obviously, the story is about a prostitute and sort of a Pretty Woman style tale. I almost feel like this punk reggae staccato chord feel is the archetypal Police sound. You'll be hearing it quite often. It's such a raw performance. That bass really digs in, and it just builds to that chorus. It's a classic, what more can you say? And fortunately, their next record, Reggatta de Blanc, would feature another timeless track. Yeah, Message in a Bottle rocks so hard. That guitar riff is so much fun to play. It first premiered on Rock Goes to College before they had even recorded the song, and already everything is there. The energy, the dynamic breaks in the chorus, and the audience just loves it. They know they've just gotten a preview of rock and roll history. I think this was really their breakout single and their breakout album. I really admire that they chose to return to the same indie studio they cut the first record on, keeping their expenses down and retaining creative control. It's why Reggatta de Blanc feels a little more experimental. Case in point, Walking on the Moon. This is such a groovy tune. Apparently Sting was drunk walking around his room when he wrote it, but thought Walking Round the Room was a stupid title, so he replaced it with something even more stupid, as he said. That reggae feel is clearly defined by Stuart's touch, and that delay added to his hi-hat gives it some distinctive color. Same with the delayed guitar hits from Andy, and that bass is just holding it all together. Let's close out this side with the opening to Zenyatta Mondatta. There's been a lot of speculation on the teacher-student affair theme of Don't Stand So Close to Me, especially since Sting was a school teacher, but he's denied it being about personal experience. Regardless, it's another catchy tune. Noticeably more synth textures which add to the moodier feel of the song. The first time I played this track, I was thinking to myself, where have I heard this before? Then I realized that Sting himself sang the same melody in the Dire Straits' Money for Nothing. Well, they sure got some mileage out of that hook. We'll continue with Zenyatta Mondatta as we kick off side 2. When the world keeps running down, you make the best of what's still around. Yeah, their titles started getting a little long. I'm not sure what it is about this song. It's pretty repetitive. The same chord sequence and groove repeated over and over, maybe influenced by the disco scene. That bass breakdown sounds like the basis for an extended club remix. But it's quite hypnotic, and as for Sting's post-apocalyptic lyrics, is it just me or do they sound very relevant?
Tell me where would I go? I ain't been out in years.
Now let's dive into what may very well be my favorite Police record, Ghost in the Machine. Listening to Spirits in the Material World, I'm reminded of how much this album influenced my Elements piece. Just the title itself is such a cool concept, and the musical arrangements sound very otherworldly, the harmonies almost ghost-like. It still got that reggae-inspired groove, but there was a bit of an argument with Sting only wanting synths on the track and Andy wanting them replaced with his guitar. Thankfully they compromised, and the blend of the electronic and the analog sounds is almost a personification of the theme itself. There seems to be this alternate version that would play on some TV appearances, which is in a different key, D minor instead of A minor, and without the layers of harmonies on the verses. It's pretty much how they do the song live, which makes sense. It's hard to recreate that produced sound live, but I really like this not quite live version. I wish they would release it as a bonus track or something. To retain the album's musical narrative and dynamics, we'll go right into Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic. It's worth noting that this is quite a departure from the Police's signature sound and is very much a pop song. It's a damn good pop song, but it did cause a rift with Stewart and Andy, who just felt there wasn't much room in this piano-driven pop song for their input. In fact, they used a lot of elements from Sting's demo and brought in pianist Gene Roussel to play those layers of dynamic piano parts. While Stewart and Andy's parts do give the song some much-needed personality, and they really support Sting, who, let's face it, is really at the top of his game here songwriting-wise, it's an incredibly written song with hook after hook. That vamp just builds in dynamics, and you can't help but sing along with the Caribbean-style vocals. Then we dive down to the very dark and moody Invisible Sun. Very synth-driven, mostly from an Oberheim OBXA, but the others definitely get a chance to shine here, especially Andy, who plays a short but effective solo in the middle. The song is specifically directed at the Troubles in Ireland, although Stewart interpreted it to be about the Lebanese Civil War. In either case, the Invisible Sun represents an unseen driving spirit that allows victims and soldiers in these horrific situations to keep moving forward. That's why the chorus feels like such an emotional release in contrast to the gloomy verses, like coming out of a dark cave to see the sun. Now I have to confess, Synchronicity might be my least favorite Police album. It's pretty well documented that the band was breaking up at this point, having to record all their parts in separate rooms.
Should we film me whooping Sting?
That would be good. That would be great.
And in terms of playing order, the first side has got a lot of filler on it, and even though the second side is loaded with hit singles, there's just too many slow songs in a row. However, Synchronicity II is the album's strong rocker, loaded with great guitar and bass riffs, supported by Stewart's heavy beat. It's long been one of my favorites. The title is in reference to psychologist Carl Chun's theory of acausal yet seemingly related coincidences. This is further explored on the more synth-driven Synchronicity I, which doesn't share much resemblance with its second part, outside of the synchronicity of a family's domestic problems and some kind of Loch Ness monster emerging from a Scottish lake many miles away. Pretty unique lyrics, really, and the music really captures that mood of anger and paranoia. We'll wrap up this playlist with another favorite of mine from this album, King of Pain. You can hear Sting moving in that more melancholic vibe that will be explored more in his solo career. King of Pain is very poetic, dealing with the breakup of Sting's wife, and filled with memorable images and a captivating flow of words. The dynamics just build more and more with lots of unique textures from Andy's guitar and Sting's keyboards. Apparently this was heavily edited in the same way as Brian Wilson's Good Vibrations, with the opening piano introduction recorded separately from the band performance. It's very dynamically constructed. Listening to King of Pain in comparison to Next to You really shows how much this band evolved over 5 years. I think this is a pretty solid playlist. Now let's move to bonus tracks. I wanted to include a live track in the main lineup, but it would have eaten up time. So let's kick off the bonus tracks with the 1979 Boston rendition of Can't Stand Losing You, another classic from the first album. This version includes an interlude of the song Reggatta de Blanc, which actually evolved out of live renditions of the song and later included as a standalone track for the album of the same name. It's just a high energy performance with Sting screaming his ass off.
Alright, Boston! This is Boston, isn't it?
Sting doesn't even know where he is. Moving back into the studio tracks, we'll include the punk-influenced It's Alright For You, co-written by Stuart Copeland. It's almost like Next to You Part 2, with another memorable slide solo from Andy. Very much in that CBGB's vibe. From Zenyatta, I went back and forth between Canary in a Coal Mine and Driven to Tears, both great songs. But in the end, I decided to go with the more politically charged Driven to Tears. Partially because it's a bit more dynamic and flows better on this list. Another couple of songs from Ghost in the Machine. First, we got One World, Not Three. I think that title is pretty self-explanatory, very relevant today. We can all sink or we all float because we're all in the same big boat. The horns are a nice addition, and Stuart Copeland's fills are just amazing here. Secret Journey I pretty much had to include because I consider it such an influence on my own Elements piece. Again, the lyrics are very direct about finding consciousness. Like Invisible Sun, the song dynamically flows between the more synthesized elements with the organic rhythm section. I debated whether I was going to include Every Breath You Take, and in the end I thought, why not? Sure, it's overplayed, but there's a reason for that. The pulse and guitar riff are both very hypnotic, while Sting's melody is very seductive, even if the lyrics come off as a bit sinister, by Sting's own admission. I think that's a good place to stop. As always, there's a link to this playlist in the description below. I'm not trying to point at my crotch, but that's probably what it looks like I'm doing. You can see an extended version of this video on my Patreon page. I'm also going to start polling my Patreons on what they'd like to see next in these playlist videos. I'm gonna do something a little bit different next time and talk about Earth, Wind, and Fire, so I'll see you all then.